welcome to both CWM members and guests today for our webinar, Embrace the Menopause. There will be an opportunity for questions a few times throughout the session, so please pop any questions you have in the Q&A box down the bottom of your screen, and we'll get to those as we come. Thank you to those who've donated to our charity partner Wellbeing of Women via their ticket purchase today. To date, we have raised an incredible £8,665 since we started our online workshops back at the beginning of lockdown in March. So that's absolutely wonderful, and they are very, very appreciative of that money coming to them in quite difficult times. I'd now like to introduce you, I'm just going to stop sharing my screen, introduce you to our speaker today, Kate Pigeon-Owen. Hopefully I pronounced that right. She's in French Canadian. Our speaker today, Kate's career started in the city, working with accountants, solicitors and financial institutions. Leaving the city, Kate has run a successful stress management company and has set up Wellbeing International Limited, offering training and consultancy in the UK, Canada and in the Far East. She's a trained mental health first aider and a member of the British Menopause Society. Kate has appeared on television and BBC Norfolk Radio, Women's Hour, and published articles on education, stress and massage in many publications. So we look forward to hearing from Kate today. Thank you, Kate.
Thank you. Thank you for a lovely introduction. I'm just going to do a share screen so that I can share some information with you as we go along. There we go. Alrighty. There we go. Okay, so welcome everybody, and thanks for making the time today to think about, together, share ideas about embracing the menopause. You know, it's interesting because I'm part of a team of people within Wellbeing International, and many of us were in our 40s or 50s and thinking we need to do more work about the menopause. But education before people get there is our real joie de vivre, if you like. So what we thought we would do is, because we've talked a little bit about menopause within this organisation already, is to maybe look at what happens and why do some women have an easy menopause. So we started interviewing women who had a different experience. So I thought we would share that together. And as I said, we got the opportunity to ask questions as we go along. So normally what we do is we do lectures around the UK, we do workshops. Favourite for me is day retreats because we get to know everyone really well and make that bespoke. We do menopause champion trainings. Really key, I think, at this point, that we've always got someone in an organisation who knows about the menopause, and we do one-to-ones. So just wanted to explain that before we started. So I have a first idea to put to you, which is, instead of really talking about the menopause, experts within this area are starting to talk about the menopauses with a big S on the end. And the reason for that is there's a lot of confusion about when is a woman menopausal. So I thought it might be a good idea just to explain why we want new terminology. Perimenopausal is when women, on average in the UK, from the age of sort of 43 onwards. And what that means is that we have 6 levels of estrogen, and it's when those levels start to go down. And at that point, women start to become perimenopausal, many of whom have no idea that that process has happened or is happening, particularly at the beginning. Interestingly, during perimenopausal, a lot of publicity about estrogen levels going down, but very little publicity about progesterone going down. And I'm going to come back to this later, because the body always compensates when progesterone goes down. You may be surprised to know that as women, we're menopausal for only 24 hours. What does that mean? It means that literally the day you've had 12 months of no menstruation, that is when you're menopausal. So literally the next day, in theory, you're postmenopausal. So you can see that actually this becomes a little confusing in terms of our terminology. So the likes of Joe Brewis, who's a specialist in the menopause, talks about reframing this in many different ways. In fact, I looked up just before we started today a reading about menopause and how that might be written about in past times or even within different tribes. And I thought I'd offer this to you. The menopausal phase for women is called the wise woman phase, and it's often connected with the crone. Interesting, isn't it, that crone is now a derogative term towards women, but it's a phase, it's our third trimester of the feminine passage. The woman who's moved through the expression of maiden and possibly mother and has worked within herself the resolution of the personal journey and stories that have made up her life. She's come to peace with who she is. So I'm inviting you all to see the menopause or menopauses as actually a stage of accomplishment, of something to celebrate rather than perhaps to dread, as the press would suggest. So the science and the symptoms, I think we could have a little look at. You're probably aware of many of the symptoms, are you not? A lot of stuff about night sweats, women sort of colouring up, being maybe a little bit more reactive, sleeping not so good, changing libido. So we're used to the sort of downsides, if you like, of the menopauses, but not so much the upside. So I said I would discuss briefly the science. What I'd like to say is that if estrogen levels are going down, and estrogen affects everything, yes, from our bones to our hair, to our skin, to our bladder, everything. What also happens is as progesterone goes down, the body will compensate and produce more cortisol. So cortisol, in this sense, might mean for some women that they become a little bit more reactive. You know, I can remember in my family one day getting a look from the family when I reacted to something as if, hang on, she's not normally like that. And it took me by surprise that I was being not really me, that I was reacting, not responding, which would be my normal way. For some women, that's the first sign that actually they might be heading towards the menopauses. I thought I would briefly say something about menopause in the workplace too, because I think it's really important. You know, throughout the UK, we're used to the idea of maternity or paternity policy. We're used to so many ways of looking at supporting women during phases during her life, but very few companies actually have a menopauses policy. 4.3 million women are employed in the UK between the ages of 45 and 60. 2/3 of them will experience some difficulties going through this phase, but 1/5 actually consider leaving work because it's difficult time and actually it's too much to handle. So we've got to change our attitude as employers and with our colleagues, managerially too, on what this phase is in women's lives. Jo Brewis from the University of Leicester did some excellent research, which has now been extended from the University of King's Lynn, I was going to say, Milton Keynes. And what they did is that they looked at many institutions, including the West Midlands Police Force, the NUT, and Morrison's, of all companies. And they looked at what impact the menopause was having in the workplace. And, you know, one of the biggest outcomes was that they started to cost how much it was if a woman actually left her post during this phase of her life. Now, I think this figure is incredibly low, 28,000. But that's what they're saying it costs if a woman leaves. Just one woman leaves as a consequence of the menopause. What they've done, though, is taken a spectrum of women across the board, whether it's, you know, from management down to admin to maybe someone who has got more a job like, say, cleaning, for example. So very different spread of income. 28,000, that figure has allowed business to go, hang on a minute, what are we doing? HR are now looking at the menopause as reason for changing their policy. It's been until recently that the Equality Act might actually deal with this time, and the Health and Safety at Work Act. Many of us, me included, think that we need a specific menopause policy, or at least guidelines, and certainly I'm involved with that in the UK. So this is key. Most women are uncomfortable talking to their managers about their symptoms, particularly if they're concerned about their job security. So isn't that interesting? So even actually if they've got a female boss, if it doesn't lead from the top, from the board down, that this is an issue that the organisation looks at, women will suffer in silence. So I'd like to sort of discuss that a little bit more with you. Jules, are there any questions already about, I'm just thinking that I'm happy to go on to different areas at this point.
Nothing's come through yet. Everyone's very quiet at the moment. So
okay. Giving information maybe. Okay. Just wanted to just set a sort of context really before we sort of move on to what we can all do about it. So thank you.
No problem.
Okay, so one of the biggest issues that women raise during this time is that they feel that their sleep is being disrupted, or they're waking up tired. You know, I could probably do, and I do sometimes, whole days on improving the quality of sleep. Personally, I think it's something that many of us take for granted, and maybe we don't consider enough that it's something that we need to work at. So I thought I would put together just 5 very, very simple ways that you can improve the quality of your sleep. It's understood that if you have less than 6 hours sleep a night, that will have a detrimental impact, particularly though if you are perimenopausal. Because at a time when your body is changing, actually you need that time to build up your strength and your resilience, as so much is altering in your life. It's actually sometimes accredited to why women during perimenopausal will actually put on weight, interestingly, not so much the hormonal changes, but the lack of quality sleep. So 2 of my very, very favorite hormones, and I've got lots, is cortisol and melatonin. So we've already talked about the fact that your cortisol level during your perimenopausal phase will increase. So actually that's one of the reasons perhaps why we have palpitations, why we feel a little bit more anxious as well. But in terms of sleep, goodness me, it has a major impact on how we sleep. 3 o'clock in the morning is a magic time, because 3 o'clock in the morning is when your body starts to produce more cortisol so that you can wake up. As you go through the day, your cortisol levels are starting to go down. And I would say from 3 o'clock in the afternoon, again, a magic time, your body starts to produce less cortisol. Many of us feel a little sluggish around 3 possibly. And the other hormone, melatonin, starts to kick in. Melatonin is pivotal in terms of helping you sleep well. And in fact, if any of you have children or relatives with additional needs, you'll know that we produce less melatonin than other people. In fact, I'm involved in baby massage, and when babies are born, they have low levels of melatonin, meaning that actually it takes a while for them to have longer periods of deep sleep. And some babies have less melatonin than others, so it may take them longer. In fact, if any of you have ever done any baby massage, one of the great perks of baby massage is that it helps produce melatonin, and the baby tends to have longer, deeper sleep and prolonged sleep. Melatonin, key, but many of us sabotage our production of melatonin. And the way that we do that is that the body is wanting to shut down, going into sleep, early evening, and our energy goes down. If any of us look at a screen, or iPads, or phones, telly, whatever it is, what we do is give our brain mixed messages. So the amygdala in the brain stops producing melatonin. Okay, so the blue from the screen, although I personally think it's any screen, switches off the melatonin, and we can end up being wired but tired because the brain's getting the idea that you want to be, it's morning and you want to be awake. It must be 5 years ago now that Ofsted produced a report exactly about this, about sleeping. And those of us with teenagers, helping them have at least an hour of no screen time in order to be able to go to sleep. So actually, I'm going to say the same to you. No screen. In my case, what I find really difficult is not checking my phone just one last time before I go to sleep. So actually, maybe no technology in our bedrooms, and we get an old-fashioned alarm clock, so we're not tempted to even use our phone as a wake-up call. So cortisol, melatonin, really important, and that will be also part of the theme as we go along here. Caffeine. Caffeine for most of us is a joy, and no one here is going to ask you not to have caffeine. What we are going to suggest, though, is particularly from 3 o'clock in the afternoon, is no caffeine at all. And that includes decaffeinated coffees and teas and your green teas. The reason is that the body still gets confused and still produces cortisol to eliminate caffeine from the body. I'd go so far to say, if you're perimenopausal, I'm suggesting that you have no caffeine after 12 o'clock. So I know that's going to be controversial for some of you, but I'm offering that out. It seems to make a big difference. Water and foods, both of which have a very big impact in terms of how you and I sleep. What I find is that I've had a really busy day, I haven't drunk enough, and around 3, 4 o'clock, I just start lugging loads of glasses of water. Actually, not the best for my liver and kidneys at that time, because really, most of us should consume most of our water in the mornings. So actually, we are hydrating our body and slowing down by about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Because if you think about it, when we go to sleep, we don't want to then to be processing all that water and basically getting up during the night, disrupting our sleep. And the foods that you have are also going to have a big impact in terms of when you sleep. Look, most students will tell you if they have to pull an all-nighter, what they'll do is have loads of protein. So protein, particularly late at night, will keep you awake. So something to bear in mind. A cool, dark room is what all specialists of sleep will tell you, whether you're menopausal or not. So not easy, maybe. We've had a few nights, haven't we, when it's been really warm. But what the body needs is a very cool environment and dark, so that actually the body then can actually just shut down and feel able to drift into a deep sleep. Best advice I could give you is to allow your body an hour to really to be able to get on board that this is night time and that you're going to sleep. There's nothing worse than feeling tired and wired. So it could be that you might read of an evening, but not on a Kindle, old-fashioned book. Some people talk about having a bath. Actually, in the sleep world, can I tell you, this is seriously contentious, whether to have a hot bath at night and whether it makes you sleep. My view is if it works for you, do it. If it doesn't work, this might explain why. if you have a really hot bath late at night, the body then needs to cool down. So it'll increase the cortisol level and work really hard at cooling you. So actually, that's not best to then drift into sleep. Having said that, maybe if you were to have a warm or not so hot bath a couple of hours before, that might be a ritual that works for you. Yeah, it's actually very interesting, and so many people find that a very, very contentious way to look at sleep and going to sleep. Gosh, I could say so much more about the quality of sleep. I think that people just don't work enough at sleep. I think it was research done actually about Maggie Thatcher, and that she didn't, in theory, need a lot of sleep. Well, what we're now starting to see is those people who only have 4, 5, maybe 6 hours sleep have higher levels of adrenaline, higher level of cortisol, and that at some point there seems to be a different payoff with that. So they're linking now lack of sleep in that way, in particular, to Alzheimer's. So something to consider, please, about your health. Really, really important stuff. I think also Jamie Oliver talked about how he only needed 6 hours till he started studying really the impact that it was having on his health. And he talks about actually he needs earplugs, he needs a mask in order to have a good night's sleep. So something to consider. I would like to move on to just a few ideas for you that might help in terms of helping you during this time. I don't want to make this about being a nutritionist, but I would very much like to just give some ideas that could be of service to you. And I've deliberately done this, that even if you're not perimenopausal, or this is a phase that's a long way off, or it's a long way ago, is that actually this could be helpful for you in terms of your immune system right now, during sort of our semi-lockdown, and feeling better. Water we've already talked about. We think that really between 1.6 and 2 litres of water is key, mostly in the mornings, as we talked about. I guess that's easier as many of us are working from home at the moment, but harder, really busy day and running around. Caffeine we've already mentioned. I think that it's worth mentioning that some women experience when they're having irregular periods, or they're having flooding, that actually caffeine can be not so helpful during that time. So something to consider if that's you. Some women can go through 4 or 6 months of some heavy flooding, and caffeine and tea seem to play their part there. Consider. Alcohol. So fair dues. I'm also an alcohol counsellor, which I don't mention when I'm going to parties because it's a bit of a killjoy. But I think it's something we need to talk about very briefly. None of us at Wellbeing International are against having a lovely glass of dry white wine or whatever it is occasionally. It's really the level of alcohol that we have is more of a concern. And it appears that particularly when we're perimenopausal, that actually this might have a bigger impact. So what do I mean by that? Many women talk about, and I've had clients say that particularly during lockdown, that having a glass of wine or, you know, a beer at night has been really helpful to just sort of mark the end of the day and the evening. In other words, transitions. And frankly, that's how many of us use alcohol in this country. The thing with alcohol is that it can help you feel sleepy of an evening. Now, some people have a glass of wine or G&T before they go to sleep because it helps them be sleepy. But it also means that actually during the night, the body has to work really hard in order to, particularly if you have several units, really hard to disseminate that alcohol from our systems. So we're just saying, be aware that it's very easy, particularly during lockdown, to get into the habit of having 1 or 2 drinks each evening. we're going to suggest that the 14 units that the government advises is quite high. In fact, many of us were surprised that when the new unit count came down for men from 21 to 14, that really surprised that that didn't happen for women. Those of us who work with children in school, actually, you know, girls need to know that maybe alcohol when they're menstruating is not such a good idea, and actually to limit the amount of alcohol each week, having at least 3 days a week where you have no alcohol at all. So just educating that new generation that as they get older and start having like healthy amounts of alcohol, that they know what that looks like. Okay, always a contentious issue, that talking about alcohol. Supplements, oh, big news. I think that the Guardian a couple of months ago had an article every single day about were supplements helpful during the perimenopausal period. Many people believe that at least have ensure that you have a balance of amino acids. It seems to help us enormously with our hormones, so something to consider. I think it was only yesterday that the report about vitamin D and whether that helps prevent the COVID virus, that was really interesting, because the government several years ago now issued that all of us in the UK should take a supplement of zinc. And in fact, they recommend 10 mgs a day. You talk to nutritionists, some will say, well, actually, when it's warm, when it's sunny, we store vitamin, that vitamin, and we have enough during the winter. So again, controversial, but I thought I would say it because vitamin D, vitamin B, really in the news. What I can tell you, you might not know, that if you're having your walk each day, is that you absorb more vitamin D in the sunlight if you take off any glasses. So something to consider. Obviously, I want you to be able to see where you're going, but if there's sunglasses, it might be for your walk that you remove them. Omega-3s, yeah, lots of stuff in the press again about how omega-3s are very helpful for us during this period. And that's all your goodies, isn't it? That's your, gosh, from walnuts to your, I suppose one of the obvious omega-3s is things like oily fish and so forth. So consider eating more omega-3 type foods. Protein, gosh, we need that for our muscles, particularly at this time. And protein-rich diets seem to be helpful, whether you're vegetarian or not. Herbal teas, yes, lots of people talk about herbal teas helping them. I'd be interested in hearing if any of you find that really useful, particularly for things like hot flushes. Gut health, oh, lordy lord, that's a biggie. Until recently, we thought that the hormone serotonin was mostly produced in our brain. We thought it was 80% of serotonin in our brain and 20% in our gut. This is important because it has a very big impact in our mood and our mood swings. We now know that 80% of serotonin is actually produced in our gut and only 20% in our brain. So if we're not eating very well or we haven't got good gut health, then actually that's going to have a very big impact in our well-being and our ability to digest. Liz Earle has written quite a few documents recently about gut health. And one of the things I found really interesting is her observation of milk and yogurts. And if you don't know, this is anecdotal, so I'm not saying this is so, but I also followed it just as a kind of experiment, and I found the same outcome. And it's this: by having a little kefir milk every day, her eyesight's improved. So we know that actually our gut health has a very big impact with our kidneys and therefore our eyes. And in fact, I haven't even put my glasses on, whereas, you know, even back in January, I would, in order to do this presentation, would need my glasses, certainly to be able to read the screen. Can't prove it, would love someone to do some research on that. find it fascinating. And the last of this, before we have some more questions, because I can see some questions have come through, is about the food window. I wonder if you are aware of what this means. The food window is the idea that if we could give our body a bigger rest of an evening and during the night, we're actually improving our immune system. We're giving our body a bit of space. So the ideal time, not necessarily ideal for family, but the ideal time to eat is really around 6:30, giving ourselves the whole of the evening with no snacks to digest. And then our nighttime sleep will be better, waking up, and then again, as much as we can, extending our food window. So what I mean by that is that it seems we have more energy if we're not snacking all the time anyway, but also if we have regular times to eat. I don't know about you, but certainly the weekends, I want a lot more flexibility in my life. But maybe during the week, this is something we can consider. So I can see that some questions have come up, Jules. I just wonder if you're able to ask some of them for us.
I will. I've just got one so far, but please feel free, anyone else, to send them through now. So I've got a question. You mentioned cortisol increases as hormones drop, which creates other issues. Presumably cortisol levels therefore also naturally settle back down as a reaction to HRT being introduced, such as the Mirena coil.
In theory, yes. I think it's really interesting that if as women, we actually understand that's a consequence and actually, if you like, own our levels of cortisol. And what I mean by that is that if I feel really stressed, I can actually choose to lower my cortisol levels. So whatever route you take, whether it's HRT or whatever, it's being aware and owning our cortisol levels in the first place. The University of Miami, for example, recently did some research that they produced about mindfulness. And one of the things that they found is that women's level of cortisol, no matter what their age, would naturally lower if just a few times a day they did some breathing exercises or particular activities. So something to bear in mind, because that's really easy stuff. And yeah, owning our cortisol levels is actually really important. Thank you.
And there's a question from Melissa. I've heard that magnesium supplements can help sleep. Is that right?
I think a lot of people say that. And in fact, magnesium baths is something a client recently has told me that she's trying, and she's finding that really helpful. So things like Dead Sea salt bath, for example, seems to be helpful from that point of view. So there's a lot of research that suggests that is accurate, and including eating more magnesium-based foods too. Good. Okay, can we move on?
That's all the questions for now.
Okay, thank you. All right, so let's have a little think about our next topic. Remember I said at the beginning that what we've done at Wellbeing International is talk to women about their journey during the menopause. And particularly, we've wanted to talk to women who've had an easy journey. So rather than thinking about the negatives or the things that aren't going very well for the menopause, we wanted to interview women who've had an easy journey and then start collating what that is. So you'll see in a minute that I'm bringing you on a journey, because we've developed something with 5 aspects from women that we've spoken to, including women at CWM, by the way, who've also agreed that they come into and they do the 5 things that we're about to discuss. Now, one of the very key aspects for us is this idea of exercise. Exercise for many of us, I guess, has increased while we are in lockdown. So there's an opportunity, gosh, I mean, so many opportunities actually to exercise maybe sort of, on screen, live, or just to be able to go out and about, having a little bit more time, perhaps, because we're no longer having to commute as much as we used to. We're all clear that we need to exercise, but I'm going to suggest thinking about exercise as in 3 different types. The first type of exercise I'm going to suggest we need is cardiovascular. So even if it's a couple of times a week, what can we do to get our heart pumping? What can we do to really sort of build our energy levels up? Many of us forget this one, maybe. A joy for me has been being able to cycle, because I've had more time, and I'm lucky I'm out in the countryside, really. I have a dear colleague, and she's 87, and her energy is amazing. And I asked her, I said, do you still exercise? She said, oh yeah. She said, I take the oldies, this is her quote, I take the oldies out for Nordic walking. And she literally, I love the fact that she's much older than everyone else, and she calls them the oldies. She's 87. And they go Nordic walking a couple of times a week. But actually, if you've ever done that, that is hard work and a lot more work than walking. So anyway, I'm just trying to give you suggestions of what might work for you. I think a lot of people have started doing HIIT programs, haven't they now? Something to consider. If you're wanting to build your immune system, and also just your joie de vivre, again, cardiovascular exercise is really helpful. Second type of exercise, my favorite, is walking. Actually, I think we all need to walk. Again, maybe it's become more of a tradition during lockdown, if we can get our family out. I read somewhere that actually many puppies have been sold during this period. So people have actually been buying dogs in order and then taking them for walks every day. I hope those dogs are going to be all right when we all go back to our old routine, because I guess they're going to miss us. But actually, dog walkers actually are considered to live longer than the rest of us, because it's that routine. It's not just fine weather walking. It's no matter what, going out, having a routine. And just walking has a great impact in terms of our digestion, actually how our deportment, so many ways. But also it helps us with our ability to lower our cortisol levels. And you've probably been hearing about forest bathing. So if you're lucky enough to go for walks with lots of trees and in the forest, they're starting to measure the fact that we're increasing our oxytocin levels, which is our feel-good hormone, by walking. So science keeps backing up how much we need to be outside, how much we need different kinds of exercise. So walking, most of us can manage that. Third type of exercise. Actually, this is at one of our wonderful retreats that we use, retreat venues in North Norfolk. And this is of yoga, but it doesn't have to be yoga specifically. What we're suggesting is choose an exercise a couple of times a week that's going to help your core strength. So, as the muscles perhaps weaken as we get a bit older, we need to remind our body to strengthen. I think that yoga is particularly helpful in terms of, sort of the midriff that sort of many women talk about in their late 40s and 50s. The area kind of thickens. Interestingly, it appears that women who do things like yoga, Pilates, and Tai Chi seem to have that less. So I don't know if that's an incentive for you, but something to consider maybe. And therefore, I am going to tell you my secret weapon. My secret weapon for remaining fit is something called Qigong. And I don't know if you've heard of that. You might have heard of Tai Chi. For me, Qigong is, if you like, the precursor to Tai Chi. And it seems to work. Now, you do not have to do that position on a cliff edge like that. I just really love that picture. And one day I want to go somewhere like that and practice Qigong. But actually, it's these days it's in my office at home or in Norwich when I can get to go to the centre where I practice. Interestingly, and I wanted to mention it at this point, that Qigong is particularly helpful during this time when we're trying to build our immune system. So it's been proven to strengthen your immune system, help your lung capacity. That seems very important, does it not, right now? And your oxygen levels, and be seen to reduce stress and anxiety. It's also the fact that, you know, in a class, you could have someone who's in their 80s as well as someone who's in their 20s. It seems to be so lovely to embrace all ages together. If any of you are interested in learning more about Qigong, I am lucky enough that I'm able, and I don't have a relationship with this organisation, but there are free Qigong classes if you would like to try them for a week. So I'm going to give you a link at the end of this session. And if anyone wants me to email that to them, I'm happy to do that. But it's great, you get a whole week of either live classes, background information, or recorded classes for a week, just to see if it's your kind of thing. And great, I think, to have that opportunity. Good. So that is definitely my secret weapon. I love it. So I wonder if I might take you through the 5 aspects that we've discovered and been backed up. I'm trying to think how many people at CWN now I've asked this question. I know at least 3 of you, and I hope you're out there. And I've asked these questions, and they've come back with all 5 of these. And every woman we interviewed said, I haven't had hardly any symptoms of the menopause or none at all. So it's interesting. I can't prove it. It's not research, but I'd like to offer it to you to see if you think that this might resonate. Okay. So the first aspect is this idea of cortisol. So I hope I'm being too boring about that. But the key thing that you may not know about cortisol, of course we need it, is that we can't produce cortisol, the stress hormone, the get out and do hormone. We can't produce cortisol at the same time as we produce the calming, relaxing hormone called oxytocin. My favorite word in French, it's oxytocin in French. Definitely my favorite word in French. So oxytocin, if you, for example, hold someone's hand, you are producing oxytocin. If you're giving someone a hug, you are producing oxytocin. Giving, receiving a massage. So if you're one of those parents that were lucky enough to massage your baby was producing oxytocin, and you were producing oxytocin as you were massaging. That's an interesting one. So both give and receivers produce that. I was involved actually years ago in the launch of the Massage in Schools project in the UK, actually primarily here and in Taiwan. And what was fascinating is that the school bodies and the government really were keen to introduce massage, clothes massage in schools, because the children were becoming calm, but actually the act of giving a massage to someone else was calming in itself. So therefore, not just a mindfulness exercise, but also just teaching empathy. Fascinating. Fascinating. And actually, often in our retreats, we teach people to do clothed back massage because we think it's so helpful. And it's a great way to reconnect with, with children, teenagers, partners. So cortisol and oxytocin. The other, of course, is to eat lots of gorgeous food. So reducing the amounts of refined sugar that you can. Least amount of processed foods, really important. There's lots of omega-6s that we don't want so much of perhaps there. And considering supplements, that's very much an individual choice. For me, it's about amino acids in particular, because that affects our hormones so much. And ensure that we have our 1.6 litre of water daily. Whoops. Okay, exercise, again, that is key. Most of us do one of these three. I'm going to suggest that you think about how can you have all three in your life. Yeah, there's a lot I could say about that. So sleep, that it's something to work at. One of the things that I like about Fitbits, although I'm not always prone for them to be on all the time, is that if you wear a Fitbit at night, it will measure for you how much deep sleep, because many of us don't have enough deep sleep, and it's the only time when your immune system's working 100%. So it's possible, for example, to have 8 hours sleep, but actually not a lot of deep sleep. So consider that. It may be because you've eaten late at night. It could be because you had caffeine. So have a little look at that, and yeah, be interesting to sort of monitor how your deep sleep works. And maybe the surprise one, I don't know, is that nearly every woman we have spoken to on at least a monthly basis will make sure that they have either a massage or they have reflexology. Personally, I'm very naughty because I have both. And that seems to not only increase my oxytocin levels and therefore decrease my cortisol levels, it seems to be so many women's sort of secret that actually this is what helps them with going through the menopause. So I know that it's difficult to get out at the moment, but it could be, for example, you learn to do self-massage. It could be some very, very simple things that you could do to boost your immune system and to help you at this time. So I'm going to therefore invite or challenge you to consider some of these things about what your challenge could be for the week, whether it's in terms of improving your sleep, whether it's in terms of your exercise, but actually, even if you're super duper fit and doing really well, can't we always increase our well-being? I'd be really interested to see if anyone has got any ideas about what their challenge might be for the next week. We know that, you know, when we listen to webinars, we kind of have to sort of take, even if it's just one thing away from them and then put it into place. So that's my invitation to you, to make this time that you invested listening to me work for you and in your life. So yeah, I'm wondering if any of you've got any ideas or any thoughts there about what your challenge might be. Any ideas, any feedback?
Okay, while we're allowing people to think about that and possibly pass on some ideas, there is one question from Jay. Is there any research done with menopause and the effect on oxidized stress at cellular level?
That's a fascinating comment, and I think it's the University of Miami who've started investigating that. I'm not sure that they've actually published that. So I know it's something that people are investigating. I think that a lot of people believe that they know what the outcomes are, but no concrete research yet. It's a lot. My problem is a lot of what I'm talking about is anecdotal, because research has been very slow to come in to back this up. It's gone more on things like HRT, which is really important, don't get me wrong, but it's really the impact of HRT on women. That's where much of our research has gone. Yeah, if anyone knows of research that's been published, please let me know. I'm not aware that any has been published yet.
Yeah, now Melissa, thank you. Melissa has said that she knows she needs to increase cardio exercise and will aim to try for that.
Okay, thank you. I mean, I think it's great. So easy to just concentrate on one, or just think if I've gone walking, that's good, I've done my exercise for the week. And yeah, no, let's do that. Any other challenges out there? Anything that anyone is going to consider?
Nothing yet, but for me personally, I do a fair bit of exercise as it is, but I think I probably need to even mix it up even a little bit more. I've been doing a lot of virtual classes with my local boxing gym, but and which are HIIT sessions. Ooh. They are varied, so I'm getting a good mix of cardio and strength. But I think, and I walk the dog every day, but I'd like to vary it up even more, I think. So, and the other challenge, which doesn't necessarily relate to menopause, is actually getting my teenage boys out the door a little bit more, especially as they are approaching school holidays. So
yes, and having that home the whole time is different. I mean, I think what's difficult is that those of us who love to go for a massage, for example, is, you know, and for example, the first appointment I can get when government restrictions applied is 8th of August. So this is part of your sort of wellbeing routine. It's tricky, isn't it, having to wait? What I can say is that if you remember that cortisol cannot go up while you're actually producing oxytocin. So cortisol, the stress hormone, we need it though, and oxytocin. So one thing you may not know is that even if you have a massage just once a month, what that does is increase your oxytocin for that day and takes quite a few days to come back down to the level it was before. Women who have a massage really regularly, and it's Kerstin Ullers Marberg in Sweden who's done research on this, amazing book if you're interested in oxytocin and cortisol production. I think our book is literally just called Oxytocin, so simple. She talks about if you have a massage regularly and you work with your oxytocin level, there's an amazing thing you can do if you invest time in massage. So what she found is that, let's say your cortisol level's here and your oxytocin comes up and your cortisol level goes down for a massage and then it goes up and down like a little wave. She's saying is that if you had a massage once a week for 10 weeks, what will happen is that your levels of cortisol will never go as high as it was before, even if you've got a difficult time. So isn't this a difficult time for us right now? So oxytocin then will start to be on an even keel, much better at being able to maintain our well-being, our sense of well-being and sense of self. And then after the 10 weeks, if you only then have a massage once a month, actually the levels stay very constant. I mean, the exception would be, you know, for example, bereavement or losing a job. But I thought that was really interesting because many of us, you know, if we're ill, we invest a lot of time in trying to get well. What we're trying to do in our organisation is say, let's not get poorly in the first place if we can. And the women that I know who have done this have noticed a massive difference in their energy and their well-being. And sometimes people say to me, well, that's great, Kate, but actually I haven't got enough money to have, you know, a 50 quid massage every week for 10 weeks. How do you do that? And we always work around it. When they're open again, you know, the guilds or sort of where they're learning massage at the colleges, actually they all have to do case studies. So they want to work with the same people. So the sneak way of getting your 10 massages, 10 in a row each week, is to contact one of these, they're not polytechnics anymore, that just shows my age, but any of the guilds, beauty guilds or massage centres where they're training, they actually will often take you on. So it could be a good way, even if you're on a budget. And I know lots of people have done that.
Great tip. I was just wondering, you mentioned the link before to your Gijom classes. I don't know whether you're able to pop that in the chat or...
Yes, and actually I need to share again because on the very last page, what I've got is a link. If you email me, I will send you the direct link for that. So any of you who would like that, I'm really happy to do that.
If you want to pop up, if you want to pop up your email address, but also while you're doing that, just got a couple of final quick questions before we wrap up. So you mentioned someone's asked about Nordic walking and what that is.
I'm sorry, I didn't explain. So Nordic walking is, you actually got sort of long Nordic sticks with a little point at. It looks like you're about to go cross-country skiing, but you're actually walking and you're doing this kind of movement. We've got a cross trainer here. It's that kind of movement that the whole body is engaged. So let me just see, because for some reason my screen sharing is not working. Oh, what a shame. Oh, there you go.
Oh, there we go. Great.
Anyone?
And then just quickly, someone's asked about getting more deep sleep, whether that's just relating to some of the tips you've already given before, or is it something different again?
Well, deep sleep, first of all, I would say the old alcohol bit is not having alcohol near bedtime, and just with food. Deep sleep is also, if you like, representative of the kind of day that you've had, because you'll have more light sleep if you're having to process your day. So winding down that hour before seems to be key in order to having more deep sleep. So rather than just crashing in bed exhausted and just zonking out, giving your body this idea of an hour just to get used to sleep, having your ritual, maybe it's putting your moisturizer on, whatever it is, preparing the room, or even thinking about your clothes for the next day, just giving your body cues to switch down and, you know, getting rid of that blue light will all increase your chances of having deep sleep. And I think with COVID, we need deep sleep more than ever before. Thank you.
Right. All right, we've come to the end of the session today. So thank you very much, Kate, for a really informative session. Hopefully people have taken away some good information and tips today. So thank you so much for your time. Just quickly before everyone goes, I'm just going to stop sharing your screen if that's all right. Hopefully everyone's got your details there.
Just take a picture of that and contact me, and I'm happy to give you that free link or any
quick photo. Great idea. I'm just going to share a QR code. If you would like to provide some feedback on the session, it's always good to get feedback on our events. So if you've got any feedback, and you've got your phone handy, hold your camera app up to the code, and it'll take you through to a short survey. So I'll just leave that up for now while we wrap up. But thank you again, Kate. We do have a couple more members-only events coming up in July before we break mid-July for the summer. And then we'll be back with some more events from September onwards, some of which are already on our website. So please do take a look. They are at the moment online events until we sort of know more about when we can meet again in person. But thank you to everyone for attending. Thank you to Kate again, and we hope to all see you soon.